Right. So hopefully you can hear me. I've very stupidly set this for a Sunday night on my time, and I've decided a good way to de-stress on a Sunday before going back to work is to do a live stream about the most divisive Tolkien related topic that's going. So, this is a live stream about the Rings of Power. So, just a very, very brief kind of update with this about the channel. I did say before that I wouldn't do Rings of Power content, and I've been kind of sneaky thinking this doesn't really count. It's just a live stream. When I think of content, I think of uh, research, recording, editing, all that stuff. I'll not do that with Rings of Power. I'm never going to do that. But you know what? The season's finished. It's been 2 months of arguments and comment sections and people telling me that Mithril is magic. So I thought, why not do a stream and we can share all of our opinions about the show, positive and negative, maybe mostly negative. But yeah, this is pretty much going to be shaped by everyone's comments. I'm not just going to rant for a couple of hours or however long it lasts. I'm hoping that you'll basically provide the content and I can respond to it. That could be your opinions, your questions, whatever you want to talk about with the show. But I will say this is the only topic that I actually need to say this for, and I wish I didn't have to, but just try and not go overboard in the comments. Don't attack each other or anything like that. People get really wound up about this, and it's just a TV show. And you're allowed to disagree, you're allowed to argue. That's all fine, but don't attack the person for having a different opinion. I'm hoping that even those who really liked the show or those who really didn't like it and everyone in between will all be able to share comments and I can respond to them. And I don't want to alienate anyone because since I've not made any videos about Rings of Power, I've been reading the comments that I've received and they're all like, there's a mix. There's loads of people that comment on my videos saying they like the show, and there's more comments saying they really don't like it. But you know, I'm not a big channel where like a channel who really hates the show, so everyone who watches their content hates it as well and they're all in agreement, or the opposite side, someone who really really loves it and everyone just loves it and they're all dancing in a circle holding hands. So let's keep it civil, that's all I'll say, and hopefully the mods don't need to work too hard. But I'll just go through the comments, and I'm very slow at speaking, as anyone who watches my content knows, and I get quite a few comments about that. And if I've not responded to you, I'll get to you eventually. So try and be patient. And you sometimes get these kind of cameos from other channels. They'll burst in and say hello, and then they'll disappear, and then I say hello to them 40 minutes later. So just bear with me. I'm very slow at doing this. So first, I want to give a shout out to one of the mods. Patricia here, 4 days ago, 1 year anniversary. Yes, this account was the very first to support the channel. And through all my different, I'm going to go to buy me a coffee. I'm going to go to just doing PayPal. I'm going to go to YouTube memberships. I'm going to go to Patreon. Patricia was always the first person to sign up. So I'd say she's my biggest fan. So shout out to you. Thanks for sticking around for over a year. And let's just start going through the comments. I can already see some that I don't want to respond to, but let's see. Breck's back, and no, in a way I did. I'll get into that as we're talking about it, but you're definitely not the only one that enjoyed the show. and I'm hoping other people will support you in the chat as well. I'm not wanting it to turn into a big hate fest, hopefully. So Melkor's here, and first question. When you read the Silmarillion and others and imagined Sauron's fair form, was it ever the form of one of the non-singing members of a 90s boy band that nobody remembers? It's a bit harsh on Halbrand. What's the actor's name? Charlie Vickers? Is that his name? No. I've always had a problem with how fair form Sauron's been shown in artwork. I think I've complained about this in other videos and maybe streams, but I think people make it too obvious that he's evil. I know that's very difficult to show in artwork. There's some like amazing Anatar artwork out there, but I think the whole point of Anatar is that he would fool you. You have to be really, really observant and keen eyesight and all that to see through the disguise. I know there's a comment there saying that you're joking. I know you're joking. You know, I'm just responding anyway. But yeah, I have the view of Anatar as someone who in the show really should have been around in Celebrimbor's workshop, if we're calling it that, and who would go unnoticed. I thought that'd be a really clever thing to do. Can you imagine, like, you saw all those background characters with Celebrimbor? I'd love it if one of them was just Anatar and we don't know until the very end of the episode or the end of the season. But they didn't go that way. They went with the obvious Halbrand, and it was so obvious that I kind of thought, are they making it so obvious that it's not going to be him? But no, they made it him. So, yeah. And I know that's a joke question. People don't need to tell me that. I'm not that thick. And Gandalf the Grey is here. Men of the West's heart slowly break over the course of the season. Right, yeah. I didn't really watch many reviews or anything. Like, I will say, other channels can do what they want, but I personally got kind of fed up seeing every time I went to my subscription page, it was just episode 4 preview, episode 4 review, what happened in episode 4, episode 4 explained, episode 4 watch party, and it just went on and on and on and on. And but I did start picking up on Men of the West videos. They started getting sent to me because I'm subscribed, but they started kind of popping up around episode 5, and yeah, I thought going into the season that Men of the West or Yoistan, who would be one of the channels that really liked the show. I was really, really surprised they didn't. And I think it was really refreshing to hear very, very honest opinions. And it was unfortunate that a lot of people started to attack him. I didn't like to see that. He's like the grandfather, even though he's about 15 years younger than me. He's the grandfather of doing this on YouTube, and he's very honest. And I think he was able to back up his opinions. And unfortunately, some people just can't take criticism of something they like, and they started to attack him as a hater and all this crap. And he's anything but that. And it was really refreshing hearing his honest thoughts. So if you haven't, then go and watch some of Men of the West's thoughts on the series, because I thought they were quite interesting to hear. David. Oh, here we go. Why did I watch it? Obvious from the trailers that it would be trash, and the creator's statements about Tolkien fans, hateful and untrue, morbid curiosity or hate watching. I don't hate watch anything. For example, the Wheel of Time came out relatively recently. I think I lasted 3 episodes and I thought, "This is shite, and I'm just not gonna watch it anymore," so I stopped. And there's a big difference here, though. I'm someone who's obsessed about Tolkien's works for years, as you can tell with the channel, and I feel an obligation to check out some media that's got Tolkien involved. I've got more of a connection to it. Even if I had problems with the show, if I didn't like it or whatever, as we'll get into, it's different. I've got a relationship with this work, so there's a lot of other YouTube channels that were the same. I know that Joshua over at Tolkien Lore didn't like the show, and everyone was asking him every episode when he reviewed it, "Why are you watching it? You just hate watching it." I bet he would say something similar, where it's like, why wouldn't he watch it? He wants to see if it gets better. He's hoping it gets better. And I wouldn't say morbid curiosity, but it's almost like a professional courtesy for watching it. And yeah, not hate watching, not morbid curiosity. It's because it's Tolkien, even if it's just in name only. And I wanted to check it out. And I don't really watch trailers for anything. I don't like things being ruined in trailers. I did see a couple of the uh, teasers, those 30-second ones they had ages and ages ago. And I've not paid attention to any creator statements. You're probably talking about the ones that people were mentioning to do with sexism or racism and all that. I don't care about all that. They can say what they want. I'll judge the show myself by watching it. So let's go through more comments. I think Sauron should not have been a mystery. It would be better as a bomb under the table style, where we know who Sauron is. That way we could have spent more time with Celeborn and the rings. I think there's a way to do kind of both here. I thought it'd be a good idea to have Sauron in plain sight while still not saying who he is. But if you're familiar with the works of Tolkien, you would know who he was. I thought they would maybe do it that way. So obviously everyone would spoil it on Twitter and all that, but if you knew who Anatar was and you saw this figure helping out Celebrimbor, you would be like, I know who that is. But people who have no knowledge of the second age of Tolkien may get surprised when it's revealed who he is. I thought they could maybe do something like that. The whole mystery thing was kind of undone where it became really obvious who it was, because who else could it be? That's what I was kind of wondering, where I saw the Amazon social media accounts and all of that, bigging this up as some sort of mystery. And I'm like, but how can anyone think this is a mystery? It's pretty much going to be Halbrand or Adar. And it's definitely not Adar. I didn't think it would ever be him. And especially like when I think it was the second episode he was in, he was being very emotional towards orcs. And I was thinking Sauron would not be emotional towards orcs. He would wipe all of them out if it allowed him to reach his goals. And I was like, Adar's not Sauron. And I was like, it has to be Halbrand. It can't be anyone else. But they still made it out to be a mystery. So that really confused me. And I agree. I don't think they did it very well. I don't know if anyone in the comments, if they want to share, did you like the mystery of who Sauron was and Halbrand and all of that? Because I think maybe on another stream I was on or something, I said that I thought one of the last shots of the series would be Anatar speaking with Celebrimbor. I thought that's how they would end it, and they didn't. When I saw Halbrand go into that the kind of workshop bit, I already knew it was him by that time. But as soon as you knew it was going to be a one-to-one chat, I was like, oh, here they go. They're going to show who he is. And it was really weak. It was really weak storytelling, I think. But We'll get into that more. And Breck saying, better if they had access to all the books. Thoughts? Yeah, definitely, I think. I'm not saying it would be, I'm not someone that's like, oh, it's true to the, I hate the word, like lore, but if they had access to everything, I think it would be more coherent. They'd stop mentioning things without really mentioning them. Even the intro, now the prologue in the first episode, I've said this on, I think, one of the other streams. I can't remember where I was talking about it, but I was kind of getting all interested when they were leading up to Morgoth, and it was building up and building up and building up, and then the shadow of Morgoth destroyed the trees, and then it just cut to Galadriel saying Morgoth was eventually defeated. That must be a consequence of uh, not having access to certain materials. And no, they didn't mention the War of Wrath or anything like that. Can you imagine, just paint the picture for people who love all the action stuff? If they had access to the Silmarillion, they would have been able to show the War of Wrath, which I don't think they'd do justice to, but they'd be able to show the War of Wrath and Caligon the Black and all of this, Morgoth being defeated, maybe even the Valar, all this stuff. Interesting to see if they could pull it off. But the prologue was underwhelming because there's a severe lack of what they're able to show. And that was through the whole show. There's all this talk on all these different sites about, well, they can't mention that character because they don't have the rights. And maybe they're changing this because they don't have the rights. And that's annoying because it says as the show opens up that they have it's based on the Lord of the Rings and the appendices, and and you've picked the second age, which has the least amount of information in the appendices, except for the fourth age. But yeah, I think it's a given that they would have been able to do more if they had access to more books. Ludwig. Of course, it's allowed. Ask whatever you want. Did not feel that Rings of Power felt like Tolkien. Do you think that about the Jackson movies? Pretty much. I've got a kind of complicated relationship with the Peter Jackson movies where people assume, because when I say that, I don't think it feels like Tolkien, that I hate the movies, and nothing could be further from the truth. I have seen the Peter Jackson movies dozens and dozens of times. I think when they were out, I think I saw each of them in the cinema like 10 times each or something like that. I was loving them. I bought every edition that's come out. I watched them regularly and all that. And I can think they're great movies without thinking they're great adaptations. You're allowed to think that if you want. And to me, it's just, and I'm sure many agree, Tolkien is more than just a plot. I think there's a feeling there for people who are really invested in it. Something can people tend to say Tolkienian, which I don't use, but a scene or a moment or something like that could feel Tolkienian, or the appearance of a character, or how they describe a concept or something like that. It can feel like Tolkien, and I don't think the show really manages it in most cases. Um, that may seem really harsh, but I'm not going to say the show is bad because it doesn't feel like Tolkien. I'm going to say, if I'm judging it from that perspective, then I would say it doesn't feel like Tolkien. But again, that doesn't have to mean the show's bad. Like I just said, I love the Jackson movies, but I don't think they're very Tolkienian, if we're saying that. And but I also want to say that it's very unfair that any complaint or criticism of the show tends to get grouped in with Jackson movies. People kept doing that online, and I don't get that. They're completely different, and I know they reference it a lot and they lean on it sometimes and all that, but I think it's unfair to judge them a 3-movie series and a TV show set in different times and all of that. I think if they were making The Lord of the Rings as a TV show, which they maybe should have, then I would understand the comparison. But we'll probably get into that more as we go on. Not the deepest when it comes to Tolkien lore, but I enjoyed the show as a TV show. Good structure and writing compared to what Star Wars shows have been doing lately, for example. Well, I've not watched anything Star Wars related in oh, it must be. I watched The Force Awakens. When was that out? That was a long time ago, I think now. So I've no idea what they've been doing. I can see people in there's a Tolkien YouTube Discord, and they talk about The Mandalorian. I know that word from, I used to play Knights of the Old Republic, the 1 and 2, and there was a character that came with you that was a Mandalorian. I remember that. So that's like Boba Fett or something, isn't it? But there's that, and there's one called Andor or something like that, and they talk about that stuff, but I have no idea. But it's interesting you say that, because structure and writing seems to be one of the biggest complaints. So Taylor K, I'd be interested in hearing you maybe expand on that. I think the writing was pretty poor, in my own opinion. It's maybe unfair to judge a TV show as feeling like a TV show, but it was doing all those regular tropes that you see on shows like Game of Thrones, and that the characters teleporting around and mysteries getting dragged out, cliffhangers that are solved within 5 minutes of the next episode, all that kind of stuff. They're doing all the usual stuff. But again, if you're expecting them not to do that, or we're kind of expecting them not to seem like a TV show, maybe those expectations are way too high. Iron Blue, hello to you again. I always like that reasoning. The show was good, it could be worse. Sauron's character was underwhelming, I agree with that. Music was great, I agree with that as well. Very similar to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think the music was good, but I think the soundtrack for the Lord of the Rings trilogy is like a different level. But I still think the music was really good. It's probably one of the best things about the show. The visuals as well, as everyone kept saying. I always think that's an excuse not to complain about the show. I was noticing that with some big channels when they first started reviewing the episodes. The first things they were talking about all the time were the visuals are great, and it's like, well, they should be. They spent enough money on them. But I agree, the show could have been worse. It definitely could have been worse. But the problem there is that it really could have been better as well. Canonical elf characters: Galadriel, Gil-galad, Elrond, Celeborn, time delegation for each of them. Well, I thought that, I've said this before, Elrond should have been the main character. I can see why they went with Galadriel, but Elrond is, for me, he's almost like the main character in the Legendarium. He's there in the first age, understanding certain things. He's there in the second age, getting really involved, and he's there in the third age, and then he's away on the boat. Yeah, he's. I know we know the Red Book is written by hobbits and with input from others. I have to think that Elrond would have had a lot to say as well. And I see him as more of a main character than Galadriel. But again, I can understand why they went with Galadriel. And so she obviously got most of the screen time, like a lot of screen time. Gil-galad, who people always talk about characters getting assassinated, like Faramir and Denethor in the Peter Jackson movies. Gil-galad, even though he's not a very deep character in the books, I can't be too harsh here because there's not a lot written about him. But it's that Gil-galad in the show really didn't feel like how I would ever imagine him. I don't know what you guys think about that, but he really seemed really lofty and arrogant. And I can't imagine this Gil-galad being the figure that stands with Elendil against Sauron. Of course, there's 4 seasons to go, but I always think it's weird if you're talking about ancient elves suddenly changing their personalities in a few years. That Gil-galad was disappointing, I think, trying to get Elrond to break his oath and all that. It didn't seem right to me. He didn't get a lot of screen time. Elrond, I think he was good. I think he got maybe enough screen time, could have done a bit more. I actually liked him. I thought when I saw those images of the actor before the show was released, I was like many others. I was just thinking, who's this guy? He looks really weird as Elrond. But I gave him a chance because I never imagined Hugo Weaving as being Elrond either. I don't think he looks anything like I would describe him. But I thought Elrond in the show was good. I would have liked to seen more of him. And his interactions with Durin were some of the most interesting parts. And I was quite impressed with him. So for all these people that are maybe, I've not read all the comments yet, they're probably asking, well, what did you like? I liked Elrond. And with Celeborn, just to move on from this, it's very strange that for a show called Rings of Power, which again has 4 seasons to go, he got very little screen time. And there's a lot of time to go, obviously, but he was like a really minor character. But I'm sure he's going to play a huge role going forward because he has to, because everyone knows what Celebrimbor, how important he is in the Second Age. How far away from Tolkien's vision? It's hard to judge her because I will be honest and say I found her extremely attractive as Galadriel. I'll just say that. I don't know what it is, but I can imagine her being Galadriel. And I don't want to blame the actress. I think she's doing what the script says and what the directors are saying. I'm not saying she's a bad actress or anything. I never got that. And a lot of people were saying it, probably because of the fact she does not act as we imagine Galadriel acting. I maybe imagine, sorry, I maybe imagine a Galadriel acting like that at some point in the first age. But by this time in the second age, which, because it's all compressed, is this quite late in the second age? If it's going to be decades or whatever, I don't really know. But I never imagined a Galadriel at this time acting like that. She's quite a complex character in Tolkien. She was invented for Lord of the Rings, basically, and kind of forced into the older stories. And then anyone who's explored Tolkien's works in depth knows that Tolkien really changed her quite a few times going forward until she's pretty much becoming a saint character. And there are different versions of her, more conflicted versions and no more Virgin Mary versions. But I still think this was quite far away. But again, it's season 1, isn't it? I don't want to be one of those people that says, watch this till the very end before you judge it. I'm never going to say that. You can judge it after a few episodes if you want, but they're really going to have to start a shift in Galadriel's character. That can't go on too long. This kind of mopey, angry, aggressive, vengeful Galadriel. It's it was a bit much. I think she didn't seem to change over the season. And the departures from Tolkien that stand out, I can't really pick one because she's so far from how I imagined Galadriel. The way she talked to the Queen Regent, for example, Galadriel's not stupid. She's very wise, and she would know how to speak to royalty and how to I don't want to say force her will onto someone to change them to side with her, but surely she knows enough about she's got tact and political knowledge to know that she could talk to this person in a certain way to maybe calm her down and see her way of things. And it was just like aggressive, that whole Tempest part, and she's thrown in the cell and all this. That's just not really Galadriel. But again, they're probably going to change her, but they'll have to really start doing that because it'd be very weird if it goes to season 5 and she's suddenly the lofty Lothlorien Galadriel. There's quite a jump that has to happen to reach that. So, um, yeah, it's a shame because I like that actress. I thought I could see her being Galadriel, um, but she didn't really act like her, and it's a shame. Hmm. Story character world building theme that I think was well implemented. Um, I was about to say Adar there, and he's not from Tolkien's writings, so I need to be careful there. Uh, part of Sauron. Okay, now this is maybe controversial because I've just complained about Halbrand and Sauron and everything, but I was very, very, very surprised and happy when they didn't go down the Sauron as an evil Dark Lord who wants to just rule everyone because he's an evil Dark Lord route, which I honestly thought they were going to do. And then when it started coming up that he was looking to almost save Middle Earth and heal Middle Earth and everything like that, that is all in Tolkien's writings. And I was pleasantly surprised when they went down that route. And well implemented, maybe not. Uh, well, kind of. But the fact they even mentioned it really surprised me. And I hope they don't give up on that so quickly because with that whole confrontation with Galadriel at the end, it almost seems like he's given up already and he's now going to Mordor to get up to no good. I'd like if they maybe stretch that out a little bit because the whole uh, coming with the elves and making rings of power, it's as much for Sauron's motives as the elves. He wants to have that bliss in Middle Earth, east of Valinor, and he can't help himself. It's almost like I can now rule over these figures as well. And there's such an interesting arc for Sauron, and I hope they've not just ended it so quickly because I thought that was obviously people that know my channel know I love talking about Sauron. That was really cool to see, but I've got a feeling they've already ended it, which is a shame. But other characters, maybe the dwarves and elves with Durin and Elrond. I'd have liked to have seen more interaction between them. I think it's good to show that elves and dwarves don't hate each other, like it's a misconception. And I'm sure that'll continue. We'll see what happens when the Balrog comes upstairs, though. Let me open up some delicious iron brew. Problematic. How problematic is the fact that they concentrated the story to a few years? Very problematic. It's one of the biggest issues with the show. I say that because obviously Tolkien's work has a lot of room to breathe. Anyone who's read the appendices will know the story of the White Council assaulting Dol Guldur. And when you read the timeline for when when they knew they were going to do it, or like Gandalf coming to Saruman and speaking to him, and all this, it's so long. It's such a huge gap. We'd all be long dead before. Like, if they decided right now to go and deal with Sauron at Dol Guldur, we'd all be dead by the time they went to do it. And that's what Tolkien's work's like. There's such huge gaps. And they've put not one event condensed into a few years. They've condensed an age. And that is crazy to me, especially when I think of the themes of the Second Age. I've always said the Second Age is about death. It's about mortality and immortality, and more importantly, death. And you have to let that breathe. We have to have the Númenóreans fall, and it can't happen in 10 years. It has to happen over generations, and they can't do it. I'm not hating on the show or ranting or complaining. I'm just saying they can't do that now. It's impossible. You can't have one of the main aspects of the entire age happen in the space of, I don't know how many years the 5 seasons will be, but let's say it was even 30 years or something. That's still not long enough. You have to have them reach their peak and then start their fall and then go over the edge. And it can't happen. And that's really disappointing. We've got Pharazôn already here. And by the time Pharazôn is around, the Númenóreans should be ready to go, ready to fall over the edge, like I said. And it can't happen. So I'm honestly really curious to see how they're going to do this, because we've got Rings of Power, and that's the first fault right there. The forging of those rings in 20 minutes of an episode, it made it look like Celeborn could forge 3 of the greatest objects ever created in the history of Adar in a Sunday afternoon. And is that what it's going to be like going forward? Is the war with the elves and Sauron going to be a fortnight? And are they going to muster the last alliance in a month? It's and they've done it so they didn't have to recast characters, which is a really weak excuse. I think it would have been really great if the only characters that are in seasons 1 to 5 are immortal elves, and we see human characters come and go, they die, and that's the whole theme, and have that end up becoming a reason why the Númenóreans fall. But they didn't. They want to keep certain characters for the whole show, and it's, as you're saying there, problematic. Normies. They do have a bit of a nightmare situation, but I think we're maybe placing too much weight on, you're saying lore fans, right? So let's say you're talking about us. Amazon don't care about us, and that's not me being cynical. For every one of me, someone who reads Tolkien every day, there's 10,000 people who, there's more than that have never read Tolkien and probably will never read it, who will watch this show. They're the people that Amazon want to watch the show. If everyone who loved Tolkien watched this show, if they were the only ones that watched it and no one who didn't love Tolkien didn't watch it, the viewership would be quite low. And if it was the opposite, the viewership would be enormous. So Amazon really, from a business point of view, care about what you're calling normies. I wouldn't call them that, but they're the audience. There's, when a Marvel film makes $1 billion at the box office, it's not all Marvel films going to see it. They're a very small percentage of that. That's how that works. Here comes Billy Big Boz. Thanks for letting me say that name. I enjoyed the show for what it was. Visually stunning fan fiction. Doesn't change the books. I'll agree with you that this is one reason why I don't really cover the show. The books are always there for me. A lot of people got really, I'm talking about Twitter here, right? Twitter's such a weird place. But a lot of people were getting like angry with me in comments when I said I'm not out to defend Tolkien, and they were thinking, you need to defend him. And I'm like, why? Just an adaptation. It'll be long forgotten, and Tolkien's works won't be. And I was hoping it'd be really, really, really good. But if it wasn't really good, I got on with my life, and it doesn't change the books for me. That's what I love to talk about, and there's always people that want to talk about that. We just have to say it's like a missed opportunity then, if it's poor in the end. But fan fiction, it has to be. This is something I've said. I don't really mean it as an insult, but it's not an adaptation. I don't know why people. I might be wrong, right? But people keep calling it an adaptation. I'm like, but what is it adapting? There's no second age book. They're not adapting Lord of the Rings. They're taking parts of it from the appendices and that, and they're forming a story in the second age. It's second age fan fiction. So I think people who are Patreon supporters in the chat will remember me talking about this in our last stream, the member stream, where I just said, imagine a map of Middle Earth. Like, imagine the map of Middle Earth with Frodo's journey to Mount Doom and all the landmarks, all the places he reaches. So, the Old Forest and Bree and Weathertop and Rivendell and on and on and on until he reaches Mount Doom. The Rings of Power, to me, is all those landmarks are the bits that they're obligated to show. They have to show them, and they're going to show them. So it's Downfall of Númenor and War of Elves and Sauron, Last Alliance, Forging of the Rings of Power, all of that stuff. All the big Second Age events are those landmarks. But the difference is that path between all the landmarks is made up. It's completely made up. And like I said at the beginning of the stream, Tolkien's more than the story to me and many others. It doesn't make it Tolkien if they cover those big points that I just said. The fact that 95% of it will just be made up. How much has to be made up for you to not call it fan fiction? Fan fiction doesn't have to be a negative thing. I'm just saying you can't say they're adapting it. They can adapt it. It's all the dialogue's made up and the story's made up. A lot of characters are made up, and that's just how it is. Thoughts on the depiction of Númenor? I never felt it was nearly grand enough to be considered the greatest human kingdom before or since. Now, this might be a restriction of it being a TV show, despite it being the most expensive TV show ever made. They're not going to do a Númenor set and something that's worthy of a huge trilogy of movies or something like that. Could it have been better? I think it could have. I think the shots going into it and the harbour shots and all that are really nice. The visuals are always good, but when it got into the nitty gritty, the characters interacting with each other, it all felt very small. And I was talking to someone else about this, and I thought, do you remember that TV show Rome, the HBO one? That was a really expensive TV show, and that made Rome seem pretty big to me, even in the small character interactions, all those little alleys, and then get into big homes and all of that. That did a better job. And yeah, I didn't think Númenor was as grand as to be the greatest human kingdom ever. But I don't know. It's maybe just because it still is a TV show, but what could they have done to make it even more grand? It's maybe those bits with like Farazan talking to the crowd. He's giving a big rousing speech and there's like 30 people standing there. That's a very TV thing to do. Use all that delicious CG and have a big crowd. Have a big public gallery place with loads of people and big rousing speeches. Even with the soldiers and all that, Númenor did seem pretty small. I'm quite disappointed in Númenor, to be honest. I think a lot of people didn't think that was a particularly good part of the show, from what I've read. Let's see. Not about Rings of Power, but should I be insulted? Let's see. Every Scot I met has a huge beard, under 5 foot tall. I'm not that short. Talks fondly of my home under the mountains. Are Scots dwarves? And are those who seem human? Critical drinker. Oh. The stream must be doing well. I'm getting a lot of spam in the chat. I'm not under 5 foot tall. I don't live under a mountain. I used to live by the sea, though. And are we dwarves? Well, apparently in media we're dwarves. I don't know why that is. No, I think I talked about that before. I think it was Dungeons and Dragons, wasn't it? That had some figure that was Scottish, and it just seems to be how it is. But Critical Drinker, he's from, I think, the Kingdom of Fife, and they're all a bit weird up there. So Richard, with all the changes made to the lore, that word again, lore, when did that start getting used all the time? Who's to blame for that? Can the second season course correct and redeem itself, or have they messed everything up? I don't want to be so pessimistic and say they can't make anything good from this. It'll be very difficult. I think the time compression is the big one, and I don't know about the forging of the rings. I know I'm so far behind in the comments here. I'll try and be brief, but forging of the rings, if they've done it the wrong way round with the 3 first, are they going to have Sauron come back as Anatar in the second season? Is it going to be the war with the Elves of Sauron? I don't really know. Second season will be the time where we can really judge. We can really judge where they're going with this. Like first season, a lot of people let things slide. There's a lot of shows. I'll just be honest here. A lot of shows where the first season is not great, and they pick it up. There's other seasons where it's great all the way through, and then there's some where it's great and then it's terrible at the end. Game of Thrones, but of course they can make a better season. It'll be tough. It'll be tough to course correct, but give it a chance, see what they do. But if the second season is worse or it doesn't improve, I can see a lot of people dropping out from the show. But in terms of you're talking about lore, I don't know how they can correct some of it. It's some decisions have already been made where I'm like, oh, that's surprising you've done that. We'll have to see what they do. But no, I'm going to watch season 2, see how they do, and I'll judge it heavily. If it's worse than season 1, I don't really know if I'd stick around for 3. I probably would. So let's see. I'm trying to. Now, this is surprising. Most folks unfamiliar with lore, I keep having to say lore, barely suspected Halbrand, much less imagined he's Sauron. It's very interesting because sometimes you forget. Sometimes you forget that going into this show, you're looking for Sauron. You're like, Second Age, we know he's coming back. We know he mingles with the elves. Who is he? And you forget that a lot of people have no idea about that. No idea when Sauron would show up, and they barely suspected it. So maybe they really enjoyed that, and that's cool. So we're in a bubble sometimes. We think everyone watching it knows the second age inside out, and that's clearly not the case. So yeah, if people really like that reveal, then that's cool to hear. I've watched the show with an open mind, wanting to like it, but to be honest, it fell flat. The plot, storylines, character development was poor. However, not everything is bad, and you still enjoyed it. That's interesting. So you wanted to like it, but it fell flat. Everything was poor, but then you say not everything is bad, but you enjoyed it. Maybe expand on that a little bit. It sounds like you shouldn't have liked it, but yeah. So if the plot, storyline, character development was all poor, can you tell me, in your opinion, why you enjoyed it still? Because that's usually stuff that would make someone hate it. Mm-mm-mm. This moment, got a cool picture there of the Wanderer. All in all, the mystery and the series are very bad, but I like the transformation of Halbrand to Sauron in the boat. I thought that was a cool shot as well. It's the one with, no, I don't like the whole Dark Queen, we're going to say all this stuff that gets said in Lord of the Rings. That's relying too much on future events. They kept doing that in the show. But yes, that shot was a very nice shot. And they also didn't show faces, which I like. I like it when it was just like the shape of Galadriel and Sauron standing there. Definitely a nice shot. There's plenty of nice shots in the show. No shortage of those. And that was one of the best moments in that confrontation, definitely. Don't think Big Bobby Dazzler. Don't think actor playing Sauron was menacing enough. Maybe that's the point, though, isn't it? Sauron, you're not meant to think he's Sauron or even evil. A lot of people were thinking Halbrand was, bargain basement Aragorn, king of the Southlands, and I think he's not meant to be menacing. That's why we're talking earlier about people being surprised when it turns out he's Sauron. If he was like really evil and creepy and deceptive all the way through the show, it wouldn't have been a surprise. So maybe you're meaning when he turns into Sauron. If you're meaning that, like when he's revealed himself and he's getting all aggressive and that, if you're talking about that, then fair enough. But if you're talking about his arc through the first season, where he's mostly just Halbrand, I think he's meant to deceive you. Geez, that's how far back I'm in the chat. I'm like half an hour behind. The prologue was underwhelming, like the Galadriel and Doriath version of the Flight of the Noldor, but when you look at the appendices, there's no excuse. I talked about the prologue earlier. It's a shame that I think the restrictions for the books and all that really held that back. It could have been a big 20-minute brilliant, or they could have even stretched it if they had more rights. They could have stretched the first episode into just being first stage stuff. But then you have to think, if they had the rights to everything, they might not have made second age. Maybe they would have risked everything and tried the Silmarillion. Can you imagine them doing that? Let's find the next one. Just trying to catch up with comments here. I've fallen behind very, very quickly. Can't really answer guitar questions. Sorry. So someone who liked it, Turquoise Dream, who pops up in these streams, enjoyed the show, curious to where they intend to take it. It's an adaptation, not a flawless representation of Tolkien's work. Right, well, I did say I don't even see it as an adaptation. It's definitely not a flawless representation of his work. It's, again, not meaning this in an insulting way, it's a made-up story with unchangeable plot points they need to cover. And from that position, yeah, it's curious to see where they're going to take it, because I know certain things are going to happen, but I've no idea how they're going to reach those events. I can tell you, and you'll know as well, like I said earlier, the things that are definitely going to pop up, but there's going to be more invented characters and more invented stories, so we've no idea how they're going to reach it. So curious is a good word. And the first mention of that channel again, Tolkien Untangled, everyone keeps comparing me to that channel. Did I see his How Rings of Power Should Have Been Written? No. Why would the Tolkien estate protect the Silmarillion rights as fiercely as they do when they would allow the Lord of the Rings books lore to be broken like this? They own the rights to the Silmarillion. They don't own the rights to the Lord of the Rings books for adaptations, film rights, and all of that. They were sold even when Tolkien was alive, but they haven't sold the Silmarillion. So they protect the rights that they have. And I think there's a whole deal here with things they're not allowed to change. But as I've said loads and loads of times, there's stuff they can't change, but they can change everything in between it. If Tolkien didn't say something didn't happen, they can pretty much say, well, it did. Have you not seen those articles that keep popping up where they're saying like Rings of Power has answered a 40-year-old plot hole and all this? And I'm like, no, it hasn't. They've invented an answer, but they own the rights to do a TV version. They don't own the rights to fill in the gaps, as in what they say becomes how it is. I've said it before. Sid Shipman, who asked this question, you could fill in the gaps if you want. I could fill in the gaps. It's just as important and useful as Amazon doing it. They don't own the rights to doing that. They can for the show, but it doesn't make it part of Tolkien's Legendarium. And anyway, I'm getting off track there. They protect the rights because that's what they own. And I think when Christopher Tolkien was alive, he would never have got rid of them. Now that there's others in charge, they probably will, but it will be for a massive mountain of Smaug's gold that they would do that. They're not above selling their souls for cash. It's a super chat here. Thanks very much. Let me just get back to where I was. Sorry, just finding where I am. Expanding on former reflections about poor plots. Oh yes, the one I just mentioned. Some of the world building, the visuals, the score. I like the visuals and the score as well. The cast, I like some of the cast. Yeah, that's completely fine. It's just the way you'd worded that before. It seemed like you hated everything, and then you were like, "But I liked it," and that was so. Thanks for clearing that up. So, yeah, I thought it'd be something like that, right? I thought the Forging of the Rings would be an entire season, and it might still be. You know, we've not heard anything about the other rings, and I know that in the story, the 16 other rings are forged before the 3, but people have to get out of that mindset. This show is doing what it wants, and they can have the 3 forged first if they're choosing to do that. I don't know if they have. I don't know if it's going to be revealed that the other 16 were already made. But that'd be strange because Celeborn seemed like it was an entirely new concept. If he'd already forged 16, then it'd get mentioned, and Halbrand was first got introduced to him. So I think the other 16 aren't made, and Halbrand or Sauron is going to return to Eregion, and they'll make the rest. I don't really know why they've changed it round, but I don't really know why they've done a lot of stuff. But yeah, I thought it'd be a whole season, and it still might be. But the way they did the 3 rings as a kind of afterthought at the end, like near the end of the last episode, that really baffled me. I thought it was far, far, far too quick, and more importantly, it made the process of forging the 3 rings really mechanical and dull. There was no magic or mystical nature to it. No, it's hard to show on screen, but no pouring of the will into it and the desire to make them, and rings of power. Where did the power come from? Magic Mithril, apparently. But it just seemed using that Mithril as an excuse to be able to make these rings was pretty weak. And yeah, it just seems more like a chemistry experiment than this magic ring making. And I thought that was pretty bad, and it was way, way, way too quick, to be honest. And dialogue is something I've complained about from the beginning. It was my biggest worry going into the show because none of it's Tolkien's. It can't be. They have to invent it for the show, and they're using words that wouldn't be used. They're then taking words directly from other stories, and then they're taking words from other adaptations, and it's been a bit messy. There's a lot of standing around, they kind of talk, and then they'll wax lyrical about the sunset and what it means and all that, and it's quite out of place sometimes. But yeah, dialogue was always going to be the hardest thing to do, I think, because they have to invent it all. They can't do what Peter Jackson did, even though he invented a lot of the dialogue. They don't have the story that they're adapting written down with loads of dialogue. The best dialogue in Peter Jackson's movies is the dialogue lifted straight from the page, and I'll die on that hill. Netflix apparently made a bigger offer for the show, but they wanted to do, off the rights, but they wanted to do, I think I saw those articles saying it's like a Marvel approach. They wanted to do Gandalf's story and Aragorn's story and all that. And this is where I say to people, not an excuse for maybe the quality of Rings of Power Season 1, but it could have been a lot worse. I think that Netflix Marvel approach would have been absolutely terrible, and I'm really glad Netflix didn't get a hold of it. Yeah. I felt the final conversation Galadriel and Sauron addresses, the characters addressed to the Mirror of Galadriel. Well, yeah, that's a problem for me, though. That's exactly what we're doing. I don't like fan service and callback stuff. It's one of my biggest pet peeves with any prequel. Like, and this isn't a prequel; it's maybe the wrong word, but when you're watching, when you're watching the Hobbit trilogy, if you ever go back and watch that, I always get really annoyed when they use lines that were from the Lord of the Rings, or make little references where the character might as well have turned to the camera and winked at you, saying, "Do you remember that from the Lord of the Rings?" And they're doing that in the show all the time, and I don't. Who likes that stuff? Like, if someone's in the chat who likes that, who likes references to other shows or films, and you like those weird callbacks that are really out of place, like, I'd really love to know why. So when Sauron is saying the lines first then to Galadriel, the foundations of the earth and Dark Queen and all this, it's all lifted directly from the Mirror of Galadriel. oh, so thousands of years later, that's what she says. And I'm like, I hate that shit, right? And they kept doing it. And um, I would have rather had Sauron just use your own words to say uh, those things you're wanting in Middle Earth, because Galadriel wants a realm of her own. She turns down going back west because she wants a domain that's hers. She doesn't want to be under the Valar in the west. That's one. That's the second fall of the elves, as Tolkien calls it. The first being with Fëanor and the Silmarils and all this. The second is the elves with the rings of power. And there's so much that Sauron could have said to Galadriel about, see these things you want. I understand your desires. You can have them. Just don't stand in my way. Something, you could have original dialogue that'd be cool. But no, they want to use dialogue that has already been written for a future story. And I think that's really weak writing when they do that. Yeah. Oh crap, I've lost my place. It's like my chat's reached the top where it's saying, you're taking too long, you need to hurry up. Hold on. Scotland. We'll see. We can't do that though. Third season will be over halfway through the show. It can't start finding its groove. It should find its groove quickly as possible. I think maybe let a show off in the first season where it can learn from its mistakes and all of that. I'm not that harsh. If the second season is a lot better, that's brilliant. Third season, that reminds me of there was someone on the Hellscape that's Twitter talking to me about Wheel of Time when I said I gave up the show really, really quickly. And they said, did you read the books? And I said, I've read the first Wheel of Time book, the one that's like a rip-off of the Fellowship of the Ring. And this person, I'm assuming with a straight face, told me that it starts to pick up after the seventh book, because Wheel of Time's 14 books or something like that. So apparently you have to read these tomes that are like the size of the Bible, and you have to read 7 of them before the story picks up. And no, I'm not doing that. So if a show has to find its groove by the third season, they've wasted 2 seasons. I think that's given it way, way, way too much leeway. Oh, and sorry, this is the same guy. I don't want to keep picking the same people. I don't think Celeborn's dead. I think he will be reunited with Galadriel. What do I think of Meteor Man? One of the Blue Wizards, he certainly could be. I think he's Gandalf. I think that's. I know. I think Matt from Nerd of the Rings. I saw a little clip on Twitter again. Why am I on that site? But I think he said, what did he say? That Gandalf didn't go east. No, that whole "in the east I go not" speech where he's given all his names. There's that, and this comment about sharing an adventure and all that, but I kind of take that as one that means he is Gandalf because he asked Bilbo to share an adventure with him. But the follow your nose thing is a bit on the nose. It's like, are they just using that because they can use that line, or are they using that because Gandalf says it in the film? I think he's Gandalf. I think it's one of these things where if you're assuming he's a blue wizard, it's almost like you're giving the writers too much credit again. If the basic explanation is he's Gandalf, I think he's going to be Gandalf. and their excuse for him never meeting hobbits until later on is that these aren't hobbits, they're Harfoots, but they are hobbits. But, yeah, I'm going to bet he's Gandalf. And if he was a blue, where's the other one? I think it's more this symbolism of, as Sauron arrives back in Middle-earth, Halbrand, Gandalf arrives Middle-earth, who ends up being his main foe, and they both arrive at the same time in the show. I think it makes more sense that it's going to be Gandalf. And if people like Matt were saying, but the book says this, again, it does not matter what the book says. The show has shown already that it will change what the book says. The books say that Anatar helped with certain rings and that the 3 rings were forged last. The show hasn't done that really. They're allowed to change things, and they seem to be. So, yeah. Other than the elves will take our jobs. Yeah, that was. We're speaking of noses. That was also a bit on the nose. What do I think about his character? It's a tough one because I think Farazan's a really interesting character as well. But again, this is never how I imagined him. I didn't imagine we're calling him Farazan, but I'll just say our Farazan. I'm so used to calling him that. But I imagined him not just being a scheming kind of politician. I thought he was like greater and more imposing. People would want to follow him. He's not kind of the Farazan. I imagine when Galadriel, there's that scene, that cheesy scene in the prison, and Farazan's kind of like, ooh, I don't imagine the one that Tolkien written being able to do that. I think he'd be able to handle himself, and they've went the politician route, and that's kind of fine. I think they're doing an okay job with him. I think the actor's doing a good job. I quite liked the scene with Tarpalantir. It's again one of the biggest issues is that it's all compressed. So we'll have to see what they do with Farazan's character going forward. But we're talking about people who don't know Tolkien getting surprised with certain things. I'm sure anyone who doesn't know anything about Farazan and that can instantly tell this guy he's up to no good. And yeah, not seen an awful lot of him. Maybe give him a bit of a chance to see. But again, like other established characters, he's not really how I imagined him to be. I imagine, as Sauron declares himself king of men, I imagine Farazan putting on armour and standing at the front of his ship, basically saying, I'm going to go and kick his arse. I don't imagine this Farazan doing that. I imagine him hiding back in Númenor while the ships all go and get Sauron. So we'll see how that goes. I think I've talked about Gandalf or the Stranger. It's so formal when my name's at the beginning of it. Stephen, within the show, how do you think Halbrand got on that raft? Was he really at flight or was it a setup? He's Sauron. I have to think that he was doing it on purpose. No, I don't imagine why. I can't imagine why Sauron would actually be adrift on a raft. Depends how they're covering Sauron's nature in this, I guess. But I'll just have to go with the deceptive route. I don't think he knew Galadriel would pop up, but maybe that was a nice surprise for him. But I think he was expecting to maybe get picked up by Númenorians or something. I don't really know. But I'd be very surprised if he genuinely was just floating around a raft, not knowing what to do. It's not very impressive for Sauron if that's the case. Geez, there are actually comments mentioning when I opened my can of juice, and that was like half an hour ago. I bet I need to get through these comments. A lot of people saying it was very poor. With the 3 already made, how would you guess the other 16 will be made? Did I talk about this already? Yes, in the text, there's lesser rings, there's 16 rings, and then there's Sauron leaves. Well, he's gone to make the 1, the 3 get made, and that pisses him off, and he wants them. And I've always seen it as Celeborn learns from Sauron or Anatar. They both make these 16 rings, and then with the knowledge that he's gained and his confidence and his desire to make something of his own, it's like the both of them split up, and Sauron is a way to complete his master plan, and Celeborn is doing his. He's like, well, I'm going to make rings myself, and he makes the 3. And I think this is just my own speculation here. I've always thought that when Sauron puts the 1 ring on and it's said that the elves become aware of him, I think that's the 3. I think if it was the 16 that had been made, I think Sauron's plan would have worked. But I think because Celeborn made these 3 of his own will, his own desire, the greatest of the rings of power that aren't the 1, I think those are the rings that help the elves realize what Sauron was doing. And that's just a little side part there. But how will I guess the other ones were made with him fleeing to Mordor? I think he's a way to regroup, do what he's doing, and I think he'll come back. Galadriel and Elrond aren't going to be hanging around Eregion forever. I think he'll go back to Eregion, and for some reason, I don't know how they'll do it, but Galadriel won't tell Celeborn about Halbrand, and they'll go away with the rings. Galadriel will get one of the rings, and I think he'll come back. And if he's taking a different form, well, maybe he will actually, maybe they will do Anatar. I wonder what that'll be like. But I think they're going to keep that actor. I thought it was very weird when he fled to Mordor and he still looks like Halbrand. Why would he look like Halbrand? But I think he'll come back, and then they'll make other rings. How's that going to fit in? Maybe an appeal to Celeborn to, don't you want to make more? Don't you want to be the best craftsman ever? Whispers in the ear. Who knows what they'll do? Sorry, just looking for a comment here. This is kind of sad. I don't mean you're sad. I'm saying it's sad that it came to that. Everything around the show made you take a break. I'll be honest and say I nearly, while all this stuff was going on, I nearly said, I'm going to stop making videos until this show calms down a bit. And I might have done that. And then I had the best month I've ever had on the channel. And I get drawn right back in. And I was like, well, I can't go just now. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I know I make fun of being on Twitter and all that. I only use it supposedly to promote the channel. I'd never been on Twitter before I had a channel. but it's tiring. It's honestly, I'm quite shocked and surprised at how divisive this thing's been, and people liking the show getting attacked, people not liking it getting attacked. I've been unable to just share your own thoughts about this show without someone just punching you in the face about it. And it's I never take a break from Tolkien's work, though. It's surely this would maybe make you get drawn to Tolkien's work and away from TV shows. But yeah, hopefully it's not. Hopefully that doesn't last long. Joshua. Are not all main characters long-lived anyways? Galadriel, Sauron, Elrond, Durin, Stranger, Durin, the two Durins. Why compress the timeline? Well, the Durins aren't long-lived. They're mortals, and there should be two anyway, but they're not long-lived. Maybe if one was very, very old and the other one was very, very young. But you're forgetting about all the men. That's the issue here. They've got Isildur and Pharazôn, Mithril and Elendil, all these figures. They're not long-lived. Well, kind of long-lived for mortals, but you can't have thousands of years with mortal characters. So they've compressed it because for some reason they wanted all these figures to all exist at the same time and all be taking part in the story. When in reality, maybe Elendil and these figures should have been introduced in like season 4 or something, but they're going to be there the whole time. And that's something that's weird as well with all these main characters. Spoiler alert for decades old Tolkien text, but we know who's going and who's going to last the whole way. And it's so strange because a lot of these established characters are just going to be there the whole time. So for all those characters you just listed, I don't know about. Well, they've got the two Durins. One of them's going to get killed by the Balrog. But we know that Galadriel is going to be there. Sauron, Elrond, the Stranger is one of the wizards. Elendil, Isildur, Pharazôn. We know when they're going to depart from the show. So it's almost as if the only characters that are actually going to be at risk are made-up characters. And who really cares about them? Let's see. I like this one. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name. What's that? Wilski or something? Do you think that in the future, Pharazôn will invade Valinor with 3 or 4 ships? I think I talked about this on Philosopher's Games channel. He invited me on to talk about one of the episodes. I think it was episode 6. And yeah, I thought it was very funny when they go to Middle-earth with like 3 ships. I'm hoping they up the CG budget and have an abundance of ships, the whole ocean covered in them, going to Valinor. If it's 3 or 4 ships, that's I'd be very disappointed. It'd be quite funny to see, actually. What's this word? Is this lore? Yeah. Honestly, that word, I use it for like Dark Souls and Demon Souls, Elden Ring, and all that. I like using it for that. But for Tolkien, it's just, I don't know when it started getting used, because before I come on YouTube, nobody was ever using that word, but I was discussing Tolkien, and it's everywhere. The lore, they're breaking the lore. And then you've got Joshua, who I like over at the Tolkien Lore channel. I have to say lore every time. I can't really explain what it is. I prefer mythology, which doesn't really get used very often for it, but oh well. And actually quite a lot of viewers for my channel, which is very surprising. Hopefully I'm not boring you all. Is it riding on the coattails of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings? The constant pseudo profundity completely pulls out any immersion. They are in a weird way. I've always said that Peter Jackson, despite me liking those films, Peter Jackson does not have the rights to the imagery of Middle Earth. And I know there's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of people love it to death. And anything that's Tolkien related, they want that connection between everything. They want it all to look like the way Peter Jackson did. But there's a lot of the way Peter Jackson made things look that I don't agree with. I don't like. And I'd love to see someone else's version of it. It's a bit like if I was making videos. I know I use a lot of the same imagery, but can you imagine that every single time I was talking about Gandalf, I could only use the way one artist showed Gandalf all the time? Well, I don't know how many videos I'll end up making on the channel, but let's just imagine I made a few hundred. Every single Gandalf image was just the same Gandalf. Would you not get fed up seeing it? Would you not want to see how other people imagine him? And yeah, this was a chance. This was a chance where they were like, we need to do New Zealand. They're talking about Howard Shore getting involved, and we need the Balrog to look like the same Balrog, and we need these. You don't need to do that. But this is people in suits and boardrooms saying, well, it's the exact same reason they would say, well, you need hobbits. Oh, and maybe if someone said, but they're not around in this story. I don't care. Put hobbits in it. People love hobbits, and that's why you get this. And I think, yeah, a lot of the lines are lifted from Jackson's stuff. The imagery, how I thought it was really strange when we saw these Númenorians, and then they had like the helmets of the Rohirrim. It was so weird seeing that. I'm like, can't you just invent your own? The Rohirrim's armor is iconic, and you could show that, or you could show the Gondorian armor or anything like that, and you would instantly recognize it. This was their chance to do Numenor and say like, this is how we're doing that. But now they look really weird, and they've got that Rohirrim helmet with the horsehair and all this. I'm like, that's weak doing that. And yeah, I think in terms of immersion, it's bad, but it's more of that fan service stuff that I don't like. Just design your own stuff. Just go for it, and just trust in your own talent, your own design. Don't. Oh, people love the Peter Jackson. We need to do that. You don't need to do that. And unfortunately, they've stuck with that. Same with Sauron. When I saw, even though it was quite a cool scene, when you see Sauron standing there with all the orcs, they've used the Prologue Sauron armor, which I've never imagined Sauron looking like that. It's more of a Morgoth look to me, but they've went with that because that's the Peter Jackson way of doing it. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Imagine you just gave some artist like design armor for Sauron when he's standing in front of all his orcs, and you could have had, those awkward behind the scenes videos of episode 1 of Star Wars with George Lucas, and they'll design these creatures and they're all up on a wall, and he's like, I like that one, I like that one. You could have done something like that where there could be 50 designs of Sauron, and you say they should have, we should do that one. But no, they're like, we need to do Peter Jackson because it's Peter Jackson. I don't like that. Mm-mm-mm. That sounds like AVGN, Roadkill Skunk, Buffalo Diarrhea. I was watching some of his videos today. Would I rather do that or watch season one? I'd quite happily just watch season one again. Thanks very much. Oh, there's loads of comments about multiculturalism. It's begun. Well, actually, it's not begun because these comments are from about 40 minutes ago. Um, trying to forge ahead here. Yes, same. Go back and watch that scene and listen to certain things Halbrand says. Again, it's one of these things, if you're not talking, you're going to know it. I'm very surprised that a lot of people were thinking he wasn't going to be, who know the text and that. But um, very obvious it was Sauron, um, in my opinion. Yeah, this part you're talking about here, I was very surprised at that as well. Um, sorry, I'm just laughing at someone's laughing at the fact I'm 33 minutes behind the comments. That's ridiculous. But you keep asking stuff that I need to talk about for more than 10 seconds. Um, surprised that they let Adar hint at the concept of evil concerning creation and subcreation in his dialogue with Galadriel. Everything comes from the one. Yeah, I was very surprised at that. I think I said in Philosopher's Game stream that that's like letters material and history of Middle Earth material, and I'm very, very surprised that they mentioned it. And even though I think it was cool that they mentioned it, because I'm like, oh, that's something pretty deep. That's stuff I love talking about. I thought it was also strange that Adar would be talking about this, unless Morgoth mentioned it to him or something like that. But that'd be kind of weird. But yeah, mentioning the one, especially, there's been these references. He referenced the secret fire as well. It's not very secret if Adar can mention it, but it's one of these things. They're mentioning secret fire and the one really for people who are just into like the movies, and that's really obscure kind of terms. But it's been said in ways where the people saying it shouldn't really know about that. So, and that's very nitpicky, but pleasantly surprised that they were even talking about something like that. That's the topics I love to talk about. But um, I remember I kind of perked up when they said that. I'm like, oh, I'm watching an Amazon Lord of the Rings TV show, and they've just talked about Eru and um, the secret fire and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of crazy. But again, how the hell did he know about that? This I remember this getting brought up. Uh, Simon Tolkien, and no, there's certain users who I'm not going to mention by name who love to call people who don't like the show whatever haters, and everything they post is crap. But they were posting about Simon Tolkien, and it's like, no, we've got Simon Tolkien. I'm like, Simon Tolkien. Uh, I know he's got Tolkien at the end of his name, but there's people in this chat that know more about Tolkien's works than Simon Tolkien does. BC. I think the death of Christopher Tolkien has had a culture shift in the Tolkien estate. More money minded, surely they will sell the Silmarillion before it ceases to have copyright protection. 100% agreed. I think people really, really underestimate how important Christopher Tolkien was for the estate, and protecting the rights and all this stuff. Is when he's gone. Well, he's gone now. I fully expect this. There's no surprise that the forging ahead of the show happened really quickly, and yeah, I think they'll sell it. And I have no idea how someone will tackle the Silmarillion, but yeah, if it's a case of we'll wait as long as possible and just lose the rights to it, and anyone can do it, or we can make 500 million by selling film rights, or even more than that, or whatever, TV film rights, whatever we're talking about, they'll do that. There's no one left at the the estate who cares about Tolkien's work as much as Christopher Tolkien did, and it's a real shame, to be honest. Yes, the whole Mithril in the show, though, that becomes part of the ring. That's what gives it its power, apparently. But in Tolkien's story, we're talking about what the rings are made of physically, and Galadriel's is made of Mithril. Whoa. This popped up. I think, was it not said, I don't know if it was behind the scenes or something, was it not said that they made it for her in Númenor, and it's not the same armour that she dropped when they were doing that weird Scientology / Mormon kind of trip to Valinor? I think it's different armour. Maybe. Did Gandalf go to Rindal? It's not said. He says in that, well, it's not him that says, it's Faramir, but it says his names in all these different places and who calls him this or that. It says the east I go not, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he never went east, does it? But we know that with the Istari, that Saruman did and the Blue Wizards did. It's not really said that Gandalf did. Maybe he didn't have to go, but again, this is something that they can just change. It doesn't matter if Gandalf went through or not. Like, I'm just saying that in terms of them writing this show. It's if they want to change it, they're going to change it, and that's just kind of how it is. But while we're here, and it's fresh here, thanks very much to Patricia for giving out some memberships. Hopefully, they're worth it. I'll have to make it worth it to you. But thanks very much. That's very kind of you. Yeah, like this. To the east I go not. Okay. Is that the same as saying I've never went east? I know that sounds like one of these excuses people make when they're making strange decisions in the show. Tolkien never said that Frodo doesn't fart rainbows, but to the east I go not. I don't know. Depends how you want to read it, I guess. But oh, there's more memberships getting gifted by Grant. Generous Grant. Where are you? I can't see your name pop up. It's not popping up for some reason. Yeah, very generous. Let's see. So this part, the portrayal of Númenor, the lack of religion and Eru. Again, this is one of these things, though, it's plenty of time for that. I think if they're going to go the route of corruption through Sauron and fear of death and all that, if they're going to do it, that stuff has to all come up, doesn't it? It's um, again, we can't just say that everything's covered in season one, surely. So Numenor's been portrayed, but there's going to be a lot more Numenor. Of course there is. So maybe if we do this again, I was going to say this is probably the last video I'll do of Rings of Power, maybe until the end of season 2, and I'll do this same thing if people want. But who knows what they'll do? Maybe that'll be near the end of the show when we're, what's the downfall of Numenor going to be? Season 4 or something like that. Maybe all that stuff will start coming up. Yeah, this Isildur, this is a really weird one because you don't even have to be really into Tolkien to, well, maybe you do, but there's people who are watching this who have watched the Lord of the Rings movies. Quite a lot of people will have, and maybe they're turning around and saying, "Isn't that the same Isildur that at the beginning of the film takes the ring? The one that Aragorn keeps going about Isildur's heir and all of that." Very strange choice to have him do that, but again, maybe that's not about making the audience think he's dead. It's making Elendil think that he's dead, so that Elendil's character develops and maybe doesn't start to support the Queen Regent and doesn't support Galadriel and all that. I think it's more that. It doesn't. Not everything's for our benefit. It's for other characters to develop. So I'd probably say that's why they're saying Isildur may have died. We know he hasn't died, but Elendil doesn't. Yeah, I talked about this earlier. Do I think the stranger's Gandalf, the way he mentioned using smell to guide his way? Uh, yeah, a lot of people are saying that there is the text that's talking about the Valar sending the Astari and trusting their nose and all of that, of course, right? But I think the direct line they've used, he almost did like a little kind of wink like that, like now that little wink that Ian McKellen does in the movies, and the fact that it's a Hobbit, I'm not calling them Harfoots, they're Hobbits, that goes with them, and it's basically Frodo Jr. I think it's Gandalf, but if they turned around and said it's actually one of the Blue Wizards and he's going to bump into another one or something, I wouldn't be surprised. My thoughts on Mithril. Well, with the way the Rings of Power thing went, they couldn't have done without it because that's how they've explained the power within the Rings of Power, which sucks. Basically, it's a really bad way of explaining the power that went into the rings, because it makes me think if the dwarves could get a hold of, let's say, that big giant pile of helmets that we see in the prologue, all that metal, could they make thousands of rings of power if they start mining mithril? I thought that was terrible, and I know a lot of people were saying that the whole thing about mithril was going to be a story made up by um, Sauron, but I think that was the bet I'm sure I had with Robert in Deep Geek. He's actually sending me a bottle of whiskey for that. Where I was saying, no, they're going with it. It's actually going to be magic mithril, and he says, no, it's going to be a lie by Sauron, and lo and behold, they use it to forge rings of power, and he admitted defeat. But that's why they've given it that strange origin, and it's been used directly in the Rings of Power. Could they have done it without it if they changed how the Rings of Power were made? And yeah, I think that's one of the weirdest things they did in the show. I know they were trying to tie it in with Silmarils and all of that, but I just didn't like that. It's fair play to you if you think that was a good bit of storytelling, but Mithril is just meant to be a special metal it can be used by anyone. It basically seems magical because of its properties, but they've made it magical. And does that mean that in the Lord of the Rings, when Frodo was wandering around with the vest on, that Legolas is getting a bit of a boost from being near him? It's I thought it was a strange origin, like you said, and I'm really surprised they went with that. It's really poor writing, in my opinion. We're getting there with the comments, everyone. Yeah, this is a really good point. I've seen that. I can't bring it up on the screen just now. I need to go and look for it and save it and upload it and all that. But there's a really cool sketch of the Númenorian helmets by Tolkien himself, and they look really weird. And this is my point. It's like they could have used that, maybe, or use it as inspiration to do something else. Make the Númenorians stand out. I think they're going for this kind of idea that their look influenced those future civilizations. That's probably what they're going for. But yeah, it was a chance to make them stand out, give them their own armor. But the Númenorians as a whole are pretty disappointing. I expected a bit more. I always thought it was like an island of Aragorns, basically, and it's anything but. I don't know what this is in reference to. The looks of Gandalf. Was someone saying that the stranger didn't look like him or something? I don't know what this is about. But personality and mannerisms. Well, that stranger guy in the last episode, this one reason I kind of leaned towards Gandalf as well. I thought he was kind of acting like Gandalf, especially how he treated Nori. And there's something about the way the guy looks as well. This was one of the reasons I thought, I know you're saying the looks are superficial, but when I saw the guy that was playing him, yeah, I can see the resemblance. Obviously, the Peter Jackson, Ian McKellen resemblance. I think that's what they're going for. But again, I don't really know. He could be Gandalf. I think he is. But if he's a blue wizard, I'm not surprised if he ends up being. But I still think he's Gandalf for the moment. Yeah, and the irony here is that you left this comment making fun of me being behind with comments about 20 minutes ago. If this is what they have done, that's really poor. Could it be that Sauron was trying to get his way and he was going to go and do what he wanted anyway? And it's not exactly Galadriel pushing him to be evil, but yeah, you're maybe right. I think he was trying to remain on Númenor to, perform some evil. And he adapts when he has to come back over to Middle Earth. And it's Sauron. That's what Sauron's like. He's able to adapt and change his plans. But are they giving Galadriel all that credit for pushing him back to being evil? No. If Galadriel went with him, he was still going to be evil, wasn't he? So I think people are worried that, yeah, as soon as I said this, someone left a comment talking about incel rage. I hope they're not going for that kind of thing where he's scorned and he's going to get revenge against Galadriel. Please don't do that. I hope he was just trying to use Galadriel to further his own goals. It failed, and he's like, oh well, I'm still going to forge ahead with my own plans. Isn't it weird that someone who's not an angel knows about the flame imperishable? Very weird. It's um, secret concepts and mysteries of the universe. Uh, I think someone mentions, because I brought up this, how would Adar know about certain things? And I said maybe Morgoth. Why would Morgoth share that kind of information? Uh, they said the same thing, and maybe it's something about their corruption where they learn things that they were never meant to learn in their corruption. But yeah, it's if we're talking about the flame imperishable or secret fire and Eru and all of this, it's kind of strange that this weird orc elf thing would know of that, to be honest. Kind of bothered me that Adar believes in the one. It was nice that they introduced the concept, but an important aspect of being orcs is that they reject Eru and see Morgoth as God. They do, but they also um, hate Morgoth. We're told that as well. It's they hate their masters, the ones that are constantly in their heads and constantly making them do things and never leaving them alone. And they it's a bit like this One Ring kind of relationship. It's a love hate relationship thing. They can't help but be overwhelmed by figures like Morgoth, but they loathe them because they're creatures of hate and all of that. But maybe it's not about believing in the one. It's more uh, knowing that he's there, a bit like Sauron, where he's called like an insincere atheist. He knows Eru exists, but he starts to attribute um, kind of a lack of interest and uh, a lack of interest with Eru and the world. It's almost like, well, he's an absent god and all of this kind of stuff. I know it's pretty big for Rings of Power, but it could be that. It could be an acceptance that the one exists, but Morgoth's turning them from the one. Um, it's not faith in the one or anything like that. Yeah, there's a comment here. Why wouldn't Adar know about Eru? Wasn't he directly in contact with Morgoth? I'm just kind of amused at the idea of that though. Gather round, children and Balrogs, and I'll tell you the tale of the Ainul and Dali. Um, I don't know if Morgoth would share such things unless he was sharing it to turn them from that path. No, you've been told lies about uh, this and this, or people believe these lies, but the I'm actually the one. A bit like the story of the fall of man, where Morgoth walks among men and basically makes out that he's God, and the voice of Eru is in their head, and when that becomes silent because he's wanting them to uh, forge their own path, he's wanting them to learn on their own, Morgoth or Melkor at the time jumps in and he's taking his place. It could be something like that, where he'd only maybe mention this figure to try and elevate himself above that figure. Otherwise, why would he tell them about Eru? He'd probably just say that he was God, wouldn't he? Mm-mm. And yes, it didn't pop up on the chat for some reason, but it was Grant who gave out some more memberships. So thanks very much for that, Grant. That's 2 people. And you don't have to do that, but it's Really, really appreciated. Thanks very much. And you're an hour late, but don't worry, I'm about an hour behind comments. And Big Bobby Dazzler's back. What do I think about? What do I think Adar meant when he said he wasn't a god yet? I have no idea. I hope that wasn't a terrible kind of like throwing you off, making you think he was Sauron. I think it might have been. But then there's this whole thing with the Southlands and Mordor, and he seems all pleased in Mordor. No, is there going to be some conflict between Sauron and Adar? Which I think's weird. Sauron could probably just force the orcs from his allegiance. But I don't know. They're probably going to do that, aren't they? And I don't know what Adar means. It's one of these, people call them mystery boxes. I can't really explain it. It's not a Tolkien thing he's talking about, and it's maybe just some mystery in the TV show that we might get an answer to, or they might forget they ever said it. But I'm hoping it wasn't just thrown in to make people think it was Sauron. Oh, someone just said that. Well, didn't just say it, they said it after he did. I think it was a fake hint to show that Adar is Sauron, and as Sauron saw himself as a god king. Yeah. I'm hoping it wasn't that. That's really weak writing if it was. I hate that kind of stuff. Just we'll do that to throw people off. Like, I hope there's a reason Adar said that. Maybe Adar thinking he's more important or bigger than he actually is. But then he talked about all this, I split Sauron and all that, and I hope that also wasn't just something to throw people off, because I remember all these mental theories that people were saying, and I was kind of baffled reading them, saying, "Are you serious here? Whether Sauron's been split in two? He's Halbrand and the Stranger." I'm like, "Shut up! No, he's not." Well, it doesn't have to be from Weta. Again, they're not Middle Earth. Peter Jackson's not Middle Earth. Give someone else a shot. But animated, I love animated stuff. I think there's great potential for Tolkien works to be animated. You can do a lot of stuff in animation that you can't do in film. Plus, I just love animation, so I'd watch what was getting made, and it's a good opportunity for other kind of stories to be animated as well. One-off stories and actual stories in Tolkien, though I'm not just saying made up ones, but for the Silmarillion, I've said this in the last, I think it was the adaptation stream. I don't want them to adapt Silmarillion. I don't think it can be done, and I think that'd be a lot tougher to do than a second age story. I'd see what they could manage though, but again, it doesn't have to be Weta Workshop. It's they're not Middle Earth. And this is a comment about Isildur. Yeah, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's they actually are trying to trick the audience. I don't know how would they do that. Maybe show us Isildur being left behind, and they all leave without him, and Elendil ends up thinking he's dead, but we know he's not. Something like that. Who knows? But yeah, we all know he's not dead though. How did the three mistake him? The three. Oh, the weird cultist folk. I'm thinking it's to do with that. Well, they had the constellation thing, didn't they? Which is weird because we're expecting Sauron to arrive that way. Does that mean Sauron arrived with a meteor as well? I don't really know. But I'm guessing they mistook him for Sauron because they could sense his power. That's only his nature as a Maya or something like that. But I have no idea what those three things are meant to be. When I was seeing that the bit that they were fighting him and all that, what are they? What are they meant to be? It's uh, they're using that imagery again. No, I quite like the shot in the Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo puts on the One Ring and he sees the ring wraiths, and I quite like their designs. I think they're quite cool, especially the Witch King. That way, the kind of big stretched out, ghoulish kind of face in that. And it seems that they were doing that, and but it was still, why did they look like that? And then there's this word people keep using, proto, to explain everything. You know, everyone was saying Gollum was a proto-hobbit, which he's not, and the Harfoots are proto-hobbits, which they're not. And then there's people saying these are proto ring wraiths, and they're not. That doesn't make any sense. But they're meant to be from Rune, I think. But what are they? Why are they able to use that kind of real power stuff that Gandalf could do with like words of command and that kind of thing? Now in the Lord of the Rings, he lights fire where fire can't be lit because he speaks a word of command. It's not just a um, live action role play fireball and he'll fire a fireball. It's not what Tolkien's about. And some of the stuff these folk are doing, I'm like, what are they? Are they also Maya? I don't know. It's really strange. And how are they meant to um how are they meant to know that what this thing is if they're not also that thing? But if they were that thing, would they not know it wasn't Sauron? I don't know. It's the problem with made up characters, made up figures. It's if they are all human and they're doing that stuff, you know, it's like greater than anything like the Witch King could do or anything like that. And uh, yeah, I don't really know. So it's 10 o'clock. I'll probably be on to about, since I've still got questions to go, maybe no later than 10:30. That'll be quite a long stream. So yeah, I'm probably going to wrap up at 10:30, but I'll try and get through all the ones I'm still behind on. Damn it! There's things that are clearly responses to things I've said before, and I can't remember what I've said. Mm. What do I think of Halbrand's comment that when Morgoth was cast into the void, like a hand removed from my throat, this seems at odds with Sauron willingly aligning to Melkor? Kind of, yeah. We know that Sauron greatly, greatly admired Morgoth. He did willingly join him. He wasn't drawn to him in the earliest days like Balrogs or the spirits that became Balrogs. He benefited under Morgoth. But I think maybe this is the idea that when he was free from Morgoth in that way, he started to have um, a vision of his own. So a Middle Earth that he would heal, and eventually what would become a Middle Earth under his foot, basically. And it's almost as if what they're saying here is that this hand removed from the throat, which seems very aggressive, is more being kind of unchained from Melkor. He can do what he wants himself. But yeah, I agree with the hand removed from the throat. It seems like he's saying an unwilling slave of Morgoth, which isn't the case. So it was more that he was now free to uh, go his own way, become the Dark Lord himself. And maybe that's just the term they're using, but or maybe he was just lying to Galadriel and saying that, trying to make out that he has his good motives and he's not evil, and that just like many others, I was, you know, drawn in by Morgoth and I couldn't help it or something like that. But uh, yeah, it's kind of at odds, but you could try and stretch it to Sauron being free to go his own way and then falling into evil again, which did happen. Yeah, I thought of this. I thought this as well, but then the Blue Wizards were apparently the ones that were starting these secret cults, and that seems um, to be about to happen or later happen. I don't know, unless you've solved the mystery of if the wizard's actually Gandalf, and he is, and that the Blue Wizards already arrived, and that they have already went to the east and they've started these cults. Maybe you've solved the problem of the wizards, because that could maybe work. Yeah, you're kind of right here, but that kind of happened later. Uh, it's There's no indication that while Sauron was serving Morgoth, that he was unhappy serving him. It's that when Sauron becomes free from that direct influence, he's then able to start wanting to shape the world as he wants it. This whole idea of Morgoth's ring and the nihilism that came later and all that wasn't how Morgoth was in the beginning, and Sauron really benefited from serving him. So um, I think what you're saying would make sense in the show, but it'd be changing the relationship between Sauron and Morgoth. Sauron basically worshipped the ground Morgoth walked on and was shocked when Morgoth was defeated, and then tried to pick up the pieces from that defeat and had good motives, and then fell back into evil. And that's his kind of arc. And then as the time goes on, as I cover in a video, Sauron then even starts to claim he's Morgoth returned, and he's going down that same path that Morgoth went down, um, just a lesser form of that evil. There's a lot of comments about Christ for some reason. What's going on? Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, yeah. Adar is synonym for father. That's why I was saying that when that cheesy bit come up, where it was like Southlands to Mordor, it should have come up Adardor, which would have been fatherland. That'd have been quite funny. Yeah, yeah. They have been mentioned, haven't they? They've talked about the what was it, the power over flesh or something like that. They're saying over the unseen world. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Unseen is quite a strange concept because we tend to think of it as the the realm that we see ring wraiths in. You know, when you fade and you're in the unseen, it's like this. There's certain figures that would see the ring wraiths, even if they didn't have the robes. They'd be able to see what they look like, and other figures that could see, um, you know, Glorfindel could see that he was a special spirit and he's not just an elf kind of thing. But I don't know what they're really meaning in the show with it. The unseen, as they maybe it is some sort of uh, reference to the future, which will be ring race. This figures being drawn into the unseen. But that wouldn't really work either because none of the rings were made for men. They later get given to men, but they're not made for them. But that would be something that we've not talked about. I wouldn't be shocked if the people writing this show thought that the rings were made for men, because that's such a common misconception that they think 7 were for dwarves and 9 were for men and 3 were for elves, when 16 were for elves and uh, 19 were for elves if you count the 3, and then 16 of them got handed out. It's You even get that at the intro to Peter Jackson's movie, where it says actually says that they were made for them, and that's not how it was. So I don't know if they're going to do it that way, and that would maybe explain this unseen comment. But like I say, I would not be surprised at all if they think that 9 rings should get forged for men, which was not why they were forged. But they might simplify it and do it that way. Yeah, I think you're right here. They're talking about that. There's a comment just before it. Why was the stranger drawing that constellation in the first place? Compelled to find it to be in the east. I kind of agree with that. And let me just check something. I'll get to your comment soon. Yeah, so I agree with this. It could be a whole. His knowledge is becoming less, dim. He's growing in wisdom. He's starting to realize why he's here, and he's being compelled to start his task. It could be something like that. I think that's a perfectly fine explanation for that. Oops, I've jumped into a conversation there that I don't know what they're talking about. See, why did Gandalf turn the cultists into moths? I think you've answered your own question. I do think that's why it is. It's another reason why I think it's Gandalf. It's to do with geez, I'm getting loads of this crap again in the chat. I think it's to do with this Gandalf imagery, this idea that he's speaking to moths and all that stuff. And yeah, it's another thing where I know other channels are saying, well, he's probably this or he's probably that. I think they're looking too deep into it. I really think that figures Gandalf, and that's another reason you've just brought up that kind of adds to the case. The only reason they're doing that is because it's a moth, and you'll think of Gandalf because that happened in that other thing that was adapted. And that whole confrontation was really weird. As I said earlier, I don't know what those cultist things are. I don't know why they look like kind of skeletons, as if they were wraiths. And I'm good, and then he turned them into moths, and that is not a very good scene. Mm-mm. Because Harfoots are hobbits, just like the Stewars are hobbits and the Fallowheads are hobbits. They're not proto-hobbits, they're all hobbits. It's 3 groups as part of one bigger group. And proto just makes it seem like they somehow change into hobbits. And maybe in name, but they're still hobbits. Those little creatures we're seeing running around are as much a hobbit as Frodo is. So that's why I don't like them throwing proto in front of everything. It's they're only calling them Harfoots for, which I think are legal reasons. And yeah, as you're saying here, it's not that they're early hobbits. The hobbits in the Lord of the Rings are those 3 types. It's Gollum is, the fathers of the Stewards, right? The group that would later become the Stewards. We have Falahides and Harfoots. They are all there. It's all referenced at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, but during the story itself, they just say hobbits, but none of them are proto-hobbits. They're just it's like saying Scottish people, English people, and Welsh people are all British. That's true, but it's then like saying, well, the Welsh are proto-British. That doesn't make any sense. They're all British. It's just three groups under a bigger group. Círdan. Apparently he's confirmed for season 2, but I wonder what he's going to do. But, yeah, I wonder if they'll give him a big giant beard. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm near the end of the comments. I'd love to get to the end of them. I know I've already explained all this, so your comment's old and you're not responding to what I've said, but Harfoots are hobbits. Like I said, they're not a different group. They are hobbits. And here, did I say, right, what did I say? They were gifted to dwarves and men, not made for them. Let's see then. That's bright. I see. The whole thing's wrong though, because it says it began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, 7 to the dwarf lords, and 9 were gifted to the race of men. But that's all wrong, isn't it? 3 weren't. It's like 3 were given to the elves. But that's not. That doesn't make any sense. That's not really what happened. Yeah, it does say, you're right though, it does say gifted to men. It doesn't really say, it says given to dwarves. To me, other people can disagree with me, you can let me know in the comments. To me, that reads like it's saying 19 rings were made and 3 were given to elves, 7 to dwarves, and 9 to men. Which you could argue semantics, technically it's true, but they weren't made that way. But it reads to me like they were made to be given out to those groups, which isn't the case, but who cares really? I'm gonna use this one going forward. The Nazgals. It's brilliant. Yeah, possibly it's because it doesn't matter that Sauron's also a Maya. Not all Maya are equal. Some are greater than others. But then no one's mentioned this yet. Was it not very weird that they knew about the Istari? Again, this is another thing where they're mentioning words that you'll be like, oh, I know what they're talking about, but how would they know about the Istari? Well, Sauron didn't even. No, I've got a video about that. What he knew about the wizards, but as soon as like Gandalf arrives, if we're saying he's Gandalf, we'll just say the stranger. Once he arrives, it's like there's already these figures that know of the Istari, the secret mission of the Valar to send these figures to Middle Earth. And suddenly, even if they are Maiar, why would they suddenly know about that? And if they're not Maiar, definitely, how would they know about that? It's just a word that's getting used. It's a bit like how they keep calling him Sauron. And I was thinking the whole time, I don't think he'll like being called that. But then Halbrand starts calling himself Sauron as well. I'm like, okay, well, so I don't think Sauron would really like that, but the audience has to know who they're talking about. Yeah, there's a whole thing about this. It says Hobbit kind, but Tolkien cleared that up. I'm sure I've got a video about that as well, where he says that, well, he actually explains what Gandalf was meaning. He was deducing what Smeagol was, and he is a hobbit. He is still a hobbit. The video is the Smeagol birthday customs video, whatever it was. I'm sure I talk about it in that video. My chat on this side's stopped, so I'm not seeing new comments. Just there we go. So nearly done. We're nearly there. It's actually been pretty pleasant. I thought it was going to be loads of arguments and a big list of comments getting removed for shill and hater and all that. That is not far-fetched. I think that's what they're going for. It's going to be these wandering Harfoots are eventually going to settle somewhere, and even though the Shire really gets made quite far into the Third Age, they're going to go for that kind of thing. Maybe it'll be around Bree or something like that, but I think that's what they're going for. I think they're showing where they came from. They've made it up, but they're showing where they came from. They're going to realize eventually that wandering in the wild forever is not the way to do it, and they're going to find a place where they're going to settle, and there you go. They're going to become what we know as the Hobbits. I think that's what they're going for. But I think it'd be quite interesting if after the first season, no, we don't see all those Harfoots, the ones that are all still wandering. It'd be quite cool if they just forgot about them for a season, and maybe the only one we see is Nori away with the stranger, Gandalf, and they could be the only ones we see, and then go back to the Harfoots in season 3 or something like that. But I don't know if they'll take that risk, to be honest. Trying to pick what I'm going to answer here because I'm running out of time. I want to give a little short what's coming up in the channel bit at the end as well. Let's see. I know what you mean here. No, I wasn't too impressed with Halbrand being Sauron and that, but I agree with what you're saying. It's Sauron's always been that looming presence, hasn't he? And it's quite good to see him working. You know, he's actually in around characters and doing stuff. I agree with you. I know what you're saying there, and but I also agree with there's this comment here. The ending scene, it's so weird, but I instantly get what you're saying because it does. It's got that weird green screen in the end kind of look, doesn't it? But I think it is interesting to see him doing his stuff. I hope they're going to keep that guy that plays Halbrand, and they're going to make Sauron look like Halbrand for ages for some reason. I would love it if they were maybe a bit adventurous, and could you imagine that each series they made Sauron be played by a different actor or something like that. I think that'd be quite a good idea. Have him be Anatar in season 2, so have him look like the most majestic of all elves ever, or whatever he is, and season 3 have him look like something else, and then lead up to this Dark Lord figure. I'm giving them too much credit, though. I don't think they'll do something like that. I think that guy that plays Halbrand, that Charlie Vickers guy, he'll be around for a while because people like him. So I just wish they would maybe think outside the box like that sometimes. And I think that's us. A nice super chat then, just to thanks for running a chill channel in a time of no chill. I'm very surprised that this went so well. Honestly, I was kind of worried about it. And I think a lot of people were, oh, I'm not going to join this because you'll be hating on the show. And other ones saying the opposite, basically. I even had, when I made that community post just saying there's a stream today about Rings of Power, I had a guy called White Knob, so he's living up to his name. He came in and said, well, what's the point? You'll just be shilling for Amazon, I'm out, or something like that, he said. And I think that's so strange, because I think out of all the Tolkien channels, the only other one that I could think of that's in the same boat as me would probably be Girl Next Gondor, who's been absent for months. I don't know any other channel that's not who's covered this show less than I have. So I was very surprised to read that comment. You've clearly never watched anything on the channel, but I think it went well. And if in a few years or whenever season 2 comes out, we'll probably do it again for season 2. But I'll continue my not really making Rings of Power content. I think I don't really want to make videos about it, but I like talking about it like this. So maybe over the course, if I'm on this channel for 10 years or however long it takes, we might have one for each season, because it's been quite good discussing it. And I also like that there was people who really like the show who were here as well. And basically, I'm in the camp of I quite like it as a fantasy show, and I'll watch it. I don't like it as a Tolkien show, and I'm completely fine with that. I can kind of separate it. I really wish it was good in both categories, but that's pretty much how I see it. And that's it. So let's just finish with thanks everyone for showing up and all your questions and all your comments. That's been brilliant. But I just want to do a little channel update here. And this will probably come back and bite me because I never stick to a schedule or anything, but I want to just say what I think's coming up. So I'm currently working on a video that I don't want to reveal because I just wrote it like last night and I quite like it. And I don't know when that'll come out, but that'll be the next video. And it's not about anything to do with Rings of Power. It's not Second Age. It's Lord of the Rings. And I'm looking forward to releasing that one. It's like a pure analysis video. It's just me giving my thoughts on one little section of text. So I think that'd be quite cool. And then I've got, I need to do a Barrow Whites video that I promised, and I'm kind of struggling to think up ideas for it, but I'm doing that. I might change that and do a look at the Fog on the Barrow Downs chapter as a whole or something like that. I don't know yet, but I need to do, well, I want to do that by the end of the month. There'll be an appendices video, of course, as always. I have the Fading of the Elves. I'm wanting to do a video on that. I've started writing that as well. I'm doing the Heroes of the First Age, which will be Finrod and his battle with Sauron. I've been gathering artwork for that, like commissioned artwork, and I've got a narrated section from Phil Dragash with the whole Song of Wizardry and all that. I'm looking forward to showing that off. And I'm also wanting to do a video about power in the Legendarium and misconceptions about it, what I think it means, and I'm wanting to relate that to maybe the Ring and the Valar, especially. You know, if I asked you what's the power of Morgoth and Manwë, and you were able to tell me, and then I said, well, what's Nessa's power or Nienna's, you'd maybe struggle a bit more to explain what makes them so powerful. And that's what my whole point is. It's very easy for us to say Sauron is powerful because of this, but the fact that Nessa is far more powerful than he is, can you explain why? So I want to kind of maybe cover misconceptions of power and all that. So loads of ideas coming up, and maybe I'll change my mind, which I always do. But these are just some thoughts for what's coming up. But yeah, so thanks a lot for sticking around. It's good that Rings of Power Season 1's over. I'm hoping things get back to normal, hopefully. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming out on this Sunday evening, my time. And I hope to see you on the next video, whenever that will be. So thanks